Well, hello and back to the Mr. Arsenal podcast for something we don't usually do. As you can see, I'm joined by quite literally an Arsenal legend, part of the bringing back the glory days. One of the key men that brought back the glory days back from under George Graham till when Wenger took over. Paul Davis, how you doing, Paul?
Very well, thanks. Glad to be on. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. I want to say first off, thank you for obviously taking some time out of your busy schedule to do this. We have been working on this for a few weeks now, and it's nice to get the slot in place and get it underway. And we'll start off obviously with your book. As it's in the background there. I've got my copy here. You released it about 2 months ago now. Couple months now.
Yeah, August this year. So yeah, it's a few months now. Yeah,
a few months now. It's gone down really well from what I've heard. I did a giveaway as well because I got myself a copy. I got someone else. I got a spare copy to a giveaway in the channel. Someone else has won that, so they're getting that sent out before Christmas. But first question is why now? In terms of why do the book? Why release the book now, basically, and maybe not sooner? If that makes sense.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, it does, and thanks for supporting it. And in terms of buying it, the reason I wanted to do the book, and it was kind of it's been a long process really, because after finishing playing, a few people came up to me, generally fans, and wanted to know when my book was coming out. This is like all those years ago when I finished playing. And I never really had an interest in sort of talking about myself or my career back then. When I finished playing was probably now 30 years ago, maybe even longer. I've lost count. It seems a long time ago. Well, it is a long time ago. I was finished in 1995 from Arsenal. 1995 I finished, so that is a long time ago. But back then, when people first asked me about am I doing my book, it was never, ever an intention to do that. I never felt that I wanted to write. But over the years, as the years have gone by, more and more people have asked me, about my career, questions that fans continually ask was, generally things around Glenn Cockle is a big question. That what happened with Glenn Cockle? I always get that. Everywhere I go, and not just Arsenal fans, but football fans at that time who read, because that was a big sort of incident in my career, and I'll talk about that in the book. So fans were always asking me about that. Another question that fans would ask me about would be, what happened with you and George Graham, because I had a fallout with George Graham. And that was quite a big sort of period in my career where I was left out for nearly 2 years, and that was a big thing for me. So that was another question that fans wanted to get a bit more information on, because, back then, it's not like now where the social media, fans are able to get more access in terms of, players can communicate with the fans a lot more through Twitter and all the social media that's around now. Back when I was playing, obviously it wasn't around. So fans, I think, were a little bit in the dark as to what was really going on in terms of some of the stuff. So I think the fans were in the dark around a lot of things that were going on, whereas now they're not. And I felt, I just felt it'd be good to share with fans particularly. But then we got 2 boys now that are young men, they're in their 20s, and throughout their growing up, they've kind of wanted to know more about my career before they were born, so they didn't know about my career really. And I wanted to kind of leave something for them to read and to have solid that they could pass on to their children about my career. So that was another reason. And I suppose another key reason was that I've been in the game as a player and then got into it as a coach, and now I'm a coach developer at the FA. And I've experienced stuff in the game that I've had a fantastic sort of life from the game in terms of doing something that I, as an 8-year-old, I remember this is what I wanted to do. I remember this was a dream, and now it all came true for me. I've had a wonderful time. I've travelled around with, my main club obviously is Arsenal. I was with Arsenal for 17 years as a professional. I've had so much enjoyment being an Arsenal player, and I wanted that to come across in the book. I also wanted the book to share give people some idea about some of the struggles and some of the difficulties along with the winning of trophies and being at such a big club. So the book covers the playing side, the winning of the trophies, the debut, all the glory side of it, but it also touches on the difficulties that a player like myself had coming through. And I wanted to touch on the fact that I was one of the first. Well, I was the first black player to play for Arsenal over a long period of time, and I wanted that to come through because there's things that come along with that, the struggles that come with that, and I think it's important that people hear these stories and these feelings because it's part of our sort of journey. So I wanted that to be in the book, and so I talk a lot about that side, being the first black player to play for Arsenal, how I got through because it wasn't easy, not necessarily.
No, I can imagine, especially back then. There was no social media either. Imagine it would have been nowadays.
Exactly, yeah. So, going away to play anywhere really, as the only black player, I wanted people to get an understanding of how difficult that was at times, and so that people get a good picture of my story. And then also, I just wanted to share that part of it, and then share what happened, how I left Arsenal, because fans and everybody's saying, so what are you doing now? What happened with you leaving Arsenal? So there's a lot of questions that was asked over the years, and it's only sort of the last sort of 5 or 10 years, I suppose, I've started to think, well, yeah, let's sort of share some of this. It'd be good for people to hear it if they're interested in it. They can read it. My intentions were never ever to sensationalize things or make try to sort of profit in any way. My intention is always just so that people could get an understanding of my story. So yeah, those are the sort of basic reasons for writing the book, and I've tried to cover all those areas. As far as I'm concerned, I'm happy with how it's come across, and it's had some really good reviews. So really, really pleased with it.
Yeah, just as one of the reasons you mentioned there was obviously you were the first black player to play for the Arsenal over longevity as well. Like as we mentioned in the chat, you've mentioned as well longevity. In an era where, again, even though there was no social media, racial terms and everything, obviously you go through, as you mentioned, on away days especially. To put, you don't, of course, obviously with social media now, everyone sees it. We saw it the other night. England got knocked out, and straight away we got idiots on social media targeting black players on their own social media platforms. straight away within seconds, and adding that into the equation of nowadays, the modern footballer, what they're going through mentally, you had to go, yourself and other players had to go through that anyway on the pitch, no matter what, and to have that longevity, like I say, to have that longevity at a club, and again, Arsenal fans from. Okay, so I watched a show you was on before with Tom Canton, and you mentioned how the Arsenal fans, the home fans, were always fantastic. Home and away Arsenal fans were always fantastic with you. They never gave you any grief on that side of things. And again, I mean, and that side of things, especially that era when it was more. I don't like to say, but it was normalised back then. There weren't the hard work that's been put into to eradicate what was. There's still a long way, as we mentioned about social media. There's still a long way to go, but there's been massive improvement, and we are hopefully slowly getting rid of them dinosaurs that are of that mindset, so they say. But yeah, I just wanted to also mention and just touch on you mentioned about the Arsenal, the George Graham, the infamous knocking out a player on the middle of the pitch. Just on the players on that incident. Again, when I was growing up, and as I've got older, and I read these things back, these articles back, it was very what started that moment, because from what I can make out, it's very uncharacteristic of you to do that, especially in the actual moment of a football match.
Yeah.
What was it a build? Was it a build up in the match, or was
it
a longevity thing that built up over time, basically?
Yeah. I think two things there, Ryan. You know, the racial element within that, I think, is important to talk about and to explore, and I've touched on it earlier in terms of why I wanted to speak about that side of it, and my experience all those years ago when I was the only black player on the pitch, often in both. You know, so for example, I'm talking about really early days before probably a lot of your listeners maybe were even born. You know, I'm talking about 70s, 1970s. So, you know, anyone before under sort of 30, they wouldn't have experienced any of this. It's you know, it's before their time. So, you know, it's kind of it's leaving a little bit of history for people if they're interested to read about what it was like before they were born, and just get an idea. And as you say, things have improved in terms of that, you know. So I just wanted to give that background because that's my life. That's part of what I actually live. And so I have to write about it, and I have to.
Yeah, exactly. That comes from what I've read so far, because I'm going through. There's a lot of books coming out from Arsenal recently, so I'm getting through them slowly and gradually. But what I've read so far, that does come across, and and like you say, you haven't done this for any other reason but for your own experience, to get your own experience out there for the new generation of football fans to read back and learn basically what it was like in that time, and so they understand
where we're coming from. Where it's all coming from. So that's the reason, and it's kind of hopefully, you know, people will look to want to learn about you know, the history of the club, the history of individuals like myself, and so you know, that's one side. The other point was around going Cocker, wasn't it? Yeah. So again, people might, you know, it's a long time ago now. So, and there'll be people who watch and listen to your podcasts who will remember it. So it's for them as well. So there's people that were old enough to have been at that game, and people come up to me in the streets and say, I was at that game. I was at that game. What happened? What happened? You know, so it's kind of sharing for people that were around and can remember it, and for people that weren't around and want to find out more about it. So, yeah, I talk about it in detail in the book, what it happened and the effect it happened, what happened and the effects it had on me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a violent person, and I'm comfortable with that. But that was a violent act, and it was retaliation. To be fair to Glenn, and I wanted to get this out in the book, it was none of it. There was no racial connotations to this situation. It wasn't like there was nothing like that. He didn't say anything, or there was no innuendos or anything like that. It was nothing to do with guys. This is just like, things happening in the game that I wrongly retaliated to, late tackles, elbows, stampings, continuously through the game. And I'll talk about, moment by moment how it happened, and I retaliated and shouldn't have done. FA, ultimately punished me with the heaviest ban in football at that time. One of the biggest fines, and it really affected my career, really, because I was sort of at that moment close to breaking into the England team, and then this happened, and then it just set me back in terms of my career going forward and playing for England. So it did have a huge effect on my career psychologically. Getting through that period, it was on front page. It was on news. It was on News at 10. It was biggest stories. For weeks. So yeah, I'll talk about the effects that has on the mentality and how I kind of get through that. But yeah, it was a massive thing for me personally to go through. I wouldn't, I've learned, and I've retaliation very often isn't the right way to respond to stuff, and I've learned from that, even through provocation. So, yeah, the Glenn Cockle thing, I talk about it a lot, and hopefully people get an understanding of what happened, why it happened, and the effects when they read the book.
Of it all,
yeah. But at the time, I have to say the club were good to me. I mean, George Graham. It was when George and I were really, our relationship was really good. It was, we had a good relationship, and he supported me through that difficult moment, because it was tough. Hearing all these negative, the press and the media just really came down on me. It's like, this guy should never play football again. He's a disgrace. That was a general sort of media coverage, and it wasn't really
pleasant.
It wasn't really balanced and fair. So
no.
I had to support Georgia. I mean, I was one of the main players in the team at the time, and he supported me, and the club supported. But the FA really came down hard on me. But yeah, I think it's good for me to kind of talk about it in the book and get all that kind of my side of it out. And I feel that's what I've done with that.
No worries. Karen in the chat saying, Paul, you're a truly humble person. So many people could learn a lot from you. And again, obviously part of the book is obviously, you learn from. You mentioned that you hold your hands up straight away. You learn from that individual mistake there.
Yeah,
you had other implications of what it was doing to you, the aftermath of how the media was covering it, how that was affecting you mentally and emotionally, constantly for weeks. It was weeks on end. I look back at all this stuff, and it was weeks on end. It was like, as you said, in the UK, the number one thing, day in, day out, for weeks on end, until obviously the FA eventually gave you your punishment, and eventually obviously petered out, and you got back to doing what your day to day life in that side of things in terms of how the media were going about it. But as you mentioned about George Graham, you mentioned when the relationship between you two was in a positive place. When you were there through the dark times in terms of afterwards, as a club, we weren't competing for titles. We weren't competing apart from 78, 79 and 80, the 3 FA Cup final appearances. We wasn't really competing outside of the FA Cup, and even then we only won one of them 2 FA Cups, I believe, if I remember rightly.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, because 78 we lost, 79 we won, and 80 we lost to West Ham. My mum was there. He was not even a football fan. Her dad, my granddad, is a West Ham fan, and my uncle.
Yeah.
And they're West Ham fans, and obviously they got back the way the ticket scheme worked back then. She was able. My granddad got a ticket for himself and my mum and uncle, sorry. And so she was there, and Trevor Brookings just scored that goal. It was right. Like fantastic, yeah. But so so as I say, you're obviously going through that with Terry Neal and the other managers and all that, and it just wasn't. No matter what the club was doing, it just wasn't working. When George Graham was then brought in, what was the feeling within the squad itself? Because the squad at the time, obviously, he comes in, certain players straight away, he was out in anyway. He felt they had passed it. He needed to get young blood in and all that, fresh blood. What before he did all that, as he was announced, what was the feel in the actual? As I said, the camp. Because he was coming from Millwall of the league below us.
Yeah, that's right. I think you're right. It was a time where George came in from Millwall, and that was 86.
86,
but as you've mentioned, just the group before that were, and I played with those. You talk about the 3 FA Cup finals, and that's I remember that well because I was like just a young apprentice then trying to break into that team, and there was some good, really good players in there. I'm talking like Liam Brady and Frank Stapleton and there's so many. I mean, David O'Leary was coming through. Pat Rice, Sammy Nelson. There's some good players in that, and there's many others that I've not mentioned. But talk about them in the book. And
Alan Sunderland, the winner of the semi-final and all that.
Yeah, there was some good players, but the club wasn't. After those 3 FA Cup, we weren't really challenging for leagues. No. And we were kind of just drifting along. The fans were really getting disgruntled about things, and Terry Neal was sacked. Terry Neal gave my debut, so I've got a lot to thank him for. And even after he left, and years later, he always kind of checked in on me to see how I was getting on, and I had a good relationship with Terry, but the results weren't going well. He was sacked. Don Howe came in for a period, and again, I think he did well for a little period, but it just wasn't going in the direction of the club. Yeah, it wasn't going in the direction of the club where we should be a club.
Yeah,
fighting for the championship on a regular basis, looking to win it. So the club then brought in George, who, like you said, was at Millwall. But when George came in, it was he was clear. He was so determined to make everything success, and he just got us up and running straight away. He told us all. I talk about it in the book how he kind of had us all in. The older ones like Graham Ricks and Kenny Sampson was there, and Tony Woodcock. All these guys were
Charlie Nicholas.
All these guys were like big
names at the time.
Name players. They were on good money for that time. But George made it clear, that we need to win. We need to win Arsenal, and we need to be disciplined and organised. And if anybody wasn't prepared to sign up for any of that, then they would be gone. So we all knew, even the younger ones that were coming through, Dave Rocastle started coming through with there, and Tony Adams and all that sort of group. Michael Thomas were younger ones, but George had us all together, and everybody knew what was expected. And George in his first season had a great season, so we won the Lewis Cup. Talk about that and how that came about.
From 1-0 down as well. Went behind against Liverpool. Never been done.
Absolutely.
You're conquering Liverpool.
Absolutely, yeah. And yes, I talk about all that period and why George made it a success, and his organisation, his ruthlessness in it. Everybody knew that you had to perform, and his organisation. Talk about his first season, and then the following seasons after that, and then we go through to '89, which was fantastic. The team that we had, the squad of players, and so other players started coming in, and there's Limpar, and so we had people like Nigel Winterburn that George bought, and how he built a solid squad of players, and the camaraderie that he built between us all, and how he let go of people like Graham Ricks and Charlie, even though he scored the 2 goals, he scored the winning goal in the Lewis Cup. I think actually that might have been his last game. I'm not sure, but yeah. So George wasn't fearful of letting these established players go if he felt that they weren't constantly
pulling their weight, basically, and doing what he demanded.
So and the younger guys came in and did well. Kevin Campbell, Michael Thomas. I was a little bit older than those guys. They were like 5 years younger than me, so I was already established in the team when they were coming through. And then talk about the relationship between the players. We had people like Steve Williams who came in. George bought him, but then Steve fell out with George. There's a lot that went on in that period. It was good. There was some really good stuff. We were winning. The fans were really behind the team. Particularly the away support was really fantastic when we travelled back in those days. I think it's still the same. The away support always seems to be vocal. But even at home, we were, we felt that the fans were really enjoying the success that we were bringing the team. So I think there was a good connection between the fans. There was a good connection between the fans and the players. Obviously, when you're winning, it's easier. But the fans always been. Oh, when I say almost, I'll talk about actually the first couple of seasons. Well, 18 months when I first made my debut. After it was a little bit difficult because I think the team were going for a difficult time. And me coming in as a youngster, my style of play was more sort of a continental way, really. It was like a passing game, or wasn't sort of tearing around the pitch, smashing into people. So I think the fans it was a little bit, at that time, they wanted somebody like to give it, to be seen to be like smashing around, but it wasn't really my game. So it took them a while to kind of get my game, to understand my game, and I had to kind of adjust my game to suit what they wanted. The first 18 months, I would say, the fans were having to get used to the way I play because it wasn't a typical sort of up and down tackles and challenges. I was more a technical player. The fans have always been good to me. Even now, fans stop me, and it's a good feel. It's a good feel.
Yeah, so just before we go, because I know I've got literally a few minutes before we have to go, because we're on
Yeah.
a tight schedule as it is, and we were running a bit late for other reasons. You mentioned obviously the fans and of the home and away fans and how you felt, and in terms of how you felt about the fans brought an extra edge to the game. Like they basically you could feel it on the pitch, like how behind you guys they were. And we are seeing, especially this season, start of this season, is continued obviously as we're going on. That it seems that Arteta, Edu, and the powers that be above would the work they've done behind the scenes. We're starting to see that again, because away fans again, even through the turbulent times that we've had recently, the away fans have always been, for me, in my opinion, you call me biased, but arguably the best away fans in the country, possibly in Europe. And again, I've said this before about how patient we've been in terms of the transition from the old boards, and when they start setting up to our new owners now, and how that once they became full owners, that period where they got things wrong, they've held their hands up, but they took a risk on Edu because the lack of experience he had in his role, and Arteta, mainly Arteta, because he had no experience as a manager, as the main man. But and you can ask Kevin this if you ever speak to him. I said this straight from the off, in terms of how there's so many similarities between when Jules came in terms of where the club was, where it is when Arteta came in, and how things have slowly over a few years built to us now. Well, we're currently, as it stands, touchwood, in a title race. I don't want to jinx it too much, but when suddenly in the title race, there's a feel-good factor in the fans, home and away, especially at home. Every home game I've been to this season, no matter who it been, Fulham, Villas, and all that, even Forest the other week before the had this break. It's a loud, raucous. It's not like it has been for like 10 years or so at the Emirates and prior, where we played these lesser teams and the fans are there, but they weren't as vocal. Whereas it's non-stop now for 90 minutes, 90 plus minutes. It's non-stop from the half hour before kickoff all the way through to the end. And the fact the players, it seems like the players are feeding off that now, and we can see now, even neutrals can see this, that there's a change now, a positive change at Arsenal, where them days are slowly coming back in terms of how the fans are feeling about the club now. Because there was a period where we felt there was how can I put it, there's Arsenal and then the fans were separate, whereas now we think about a togetherness now.
Mm.
And I want that more than anyone. I'd want that. And obviously, an ex-player or Arsenal through and through as well. Every Arsenal fan up and down the country, around the world, will want that as well, because we want that unity again. Because when we are as one, we are strong. We are so much stronger than people give us credit for. But in terms of Arteta's attitude, I don't know if you've watched the documentary yet, but you mentioned obviously how Graham addressed the senior players straight from the off. In the documentary, we see how, because we heard about it last season, but you actually see it how he handled the Aubameyang situation. And now I've said this since, that the second he dealt with when he got rid of him eventually last year, that whole situation played out, I think that was the final piece in the jigsaw in terms of dealing with the players and making them know he's here. He ain't. This is no nonsense, because obviously Aubameyang, with what he was doing prior to his contract in terms of top goal scorer every other season, and being a key figure point of our last FA Cup win as well. To go through all that, and then obviously Aubameyang then starts throwing his toys out his pram, suddenly he's ill or this or that, or he doesn't turn up for a North London derby. He's late even though there's no traffic because everyone's at home, but that game was what it was. Then to do whatever then to go to, was it France, come back a day late, and then not report back until the next day and not tell anyone, and then do what he'd done in the process. For Arteta then to deal with it and say, no, enough's enough now, I don't trust you, out the door you go. I think that was a turning point for him to get the players finally fully in sync with how he wants to go forward. Because ever since then, we had a little wobbling in the last season, but we are seeing a massive improvement. We're seeing, instead of having lots of Saka carry the club in terms of the squad itself, he's now to a point where he can have an off game, and other players in and around him are still playing in the shift and putting in the goals or assists and things like that.
Yeah.
And Melvin, one of my regulars, mentioned it. Do you see a difference between how George and Arteta discipline and give young players a chance?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good observation. I mean, I hadn't looked at it quite like that, because I don't know what the real situation with Aubameyang was, was. I didn't really understand what was going on, but if it is as what you've just described, then it would be very, very similar to George, because George would do that if a player was turn up late or not turning up at all, but just being disrespectful to what was trying to be accomplished, then George would have done exactly what Mikel was done to Aubameyang. Completely. And I do remember George doing that to some of the older players who weren't kind of tying the line. So yeah, I think the way that Aubameyang situation played out, it does seem as though since then everything's kind of everything seems to be fitting in place quite nicely, and the players look together. And I'm just looking on the outside like everybody else. I'm not there at training. I'm not seeing anything like
you're a fan just like us.
I'm a fan just like you guys. So I'm trying to read between the lines. But Mikel, and I'll talk about this in the book. Mikel, I did some work, because now I'm a coach developer. I work for the English FA, and I help develop coaches. I'm a teacher, really, of football coaching. So I get the opportunity to work with some of the players that are finishing, like Mikel. I got to know him when he was starting out in his coaching career, and I've seen his work closely, not in recent seasons, but at the start. And I could see from then really how skillful he was, and it would only take a question of just experience and gaining experience for him to become a really good manager, coach. He supported me with the book, which I'm really grateful for. He's forwarded the book, and I've got a lot of respect for him for doing that, but also in what he's doing now for the club, and the way that he's got them back up top. I didn't quite expect it this season to be where we are, but I'm not going to argue against it. I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. Everything's gearing up nicely. Hopefully, if we can stay injury free, then I don't see why not. Because I think it'd be interesting how teams come back after this break, and if they come back the same way, or if there's a new sort of team that takes the lead or whatever. But if they continue on where they were, then we'll be very, very happy. But he's done really well. Has been really good.
This season in particular. I mean, all the last season, for me, from where we started, because I will wrap things up because I know you're running late now. So from where we started last season to where we finished, I never would have said after 3 games we're going to become a point of top 4. never would have thought it, but we did. But then even with that disappointment of throwing it away the way we did in the last 3 games, they dusted themselves down. He had a few additions in Zinchenko and Jesus, which I think is key, not just on the pitch. I think behind the scenes in terms of their mentality, because they've come from Man City, are used to winning week in, week out, winning trophies and all that. Adding that winning mentality, that elite mentality to this young squad of players is potentially huge. And then we're seeing it this season. And we had a setback with Man United, and straight away we were like, no, okay, dust ourselves down, we go again. We went on a massive win streak, drew against Southampton, and we started again. We're going, okay, no, well, we dropped points there, but we keep going. And we've been a little bit of a pest to Man City, and I'm loving it. And I want to see. Look, we're all Arsenal fans here. I want to see my team compete, if not win it. If they do win it, you've got to give the guy knighthood. If Arsenal win the league, give the guy a knighthood, because with the resources at his hands to achieve, even if he doesn't win it, either way, win the league this season or goes on to win it whenever, for the resources he has at his disposal against the resource of Man City, that would be huge. And again, in the modern era as well, that would be huge, no matter what anyone says. And again, I'm actually excited. I'm enjoying every week. I'm going into every game and thinking we can win this game, no matter who we play. Even Man City, before it was rearranged because of European commitments, I felt we could win that game. Because on New Year's Day, I was at the game with my brother and was like, up to that point, we're like, hang on, we come away from this game, we've lost, but no one's pushed them like we have. And the way they were celebrating after the game, that showed how much of a nag we were to them, even with 10 men for the last half an hour or so. And again, it all comes down to Arteta in terms of how he's set this team up, how he's got this mentality now of not accepting defeat. That we want to win, we want to compete, we want to win the big trophies, we want to be back in the big stage of Europe, not just in Europe, but in the big stage of Europe. And I can say nothing but thank you to him, sorry, for what he's doing, and Edu as well. It seems like the modern, I don't want to fully say it, but like David Dean and Arsene Wenger, when they worked together, the manager Arsenal was saying, "This is what I want." Dean will go and do it, and it seems like that. This is what we're seeing right now. Arteta saying, "This is what I want." Edu goes and gets them. So it takes a bit of pressure off the manager. He can just concentrate and coaching these players. But
no,
we are going to wrap things up because again we have overrun as well. I do apologise, but thank you again for coming on and having this chat, this interview, and I was talking about your book and your experience as a player in a time where it wouldn't have been easy, obviously, as you say. If you haven't already, as I say, I've got my own book. Russ, as well, one of our viewers, did win a book himself on the channel. So if you haven't already, go and get it now. It's on all good WH Smith, all good bookstores, online and in store.
And I think it's on. Just before we go, Ryan. Thanks for inviting us on, and I really enjoyed the chat, and I could see the passion for Arsenal's real strong at that as it is this end, and. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having us on. I hope everybody kind of continues to enjoy what the Arsenal dishing up this season. I certainly am. I've been there a few times this season, and the atmosphere and the fans has been brilliant. The drumming and
Jesper and Army,
I was the last game I was up there. I was just behind them and looking down. For wow, this is amazing. So looking forward to the rest of the season. Thanks for the support over the years, and those that have read the book so far. Hope you've enjoyed it. Those who have not yet read it, hopefully you will enjoy it. There's a lot of good stuff happening, and thanks for having us on.
Absolutely no problem, and hopefully sometime in the close season we can do this again, have a bit of a catch up and see how things planned out for the rest of this season anyway, and looking forward and all that. But thank you for that. And then again, I can't say thank you because you're on a busy schedule, and again, I appreciate your time because I say you're a very busy man. You're technically still working, so I appreciate that, and hopefully we can do this again soon another time in the summertime maybe.
All right.
Yeah, and everyone in the chat, everyone that's tuned in live wise, thanks for popping along, keeping the chat active and keeping your comments in there. The audio for this will be up in the next half hour for all audio listeners as well, for Spotify, Google, Apple Podcast, etc., etc. So do check it out and give us a follow over on the audio side of the podcast, and we'll see you again soon. As always, up the Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.